Okay, let's move on to our next topic. And this is a core topic, really, when it comes to World Football Summit, when you're talking about sponsorship. Now, there was a time when we were actually worried about sponsorship and its place in football. There were various threats to the game. There were concerns of how you measure your ROI, your return on your investment. Would the companies, the big companies, the blue chips, the big tech companies choose somewhere else to spend their even bigger budgets? Well, thankfully, those fears proved unfounded, especially on these shores. In terms of sponsorship revenue, Middle East and Africa accounts for $2.8 billion and 4.3% of the global market, and both of those figures are expected to grow, by the way, over the coming years. And it's the usual players who feature in the African market in the future. Think banking or betting or beer. But remember that various African betting, tech and travel giants have closed sponsorship deals outside the continent. So there is a little bit of tectonic shifting here. We need to try and convince people that the real value remains here on this continent. Now, that's not the easiest of tasks if you manage a football property in Africa, but these days, just simply don't underestimate the value that brands have in growing the game in certain parts of the world where there is still plenty of growth to be had. We had this as the theme yesterday. Don't underestimate the value of what you've got. Really back it, and then you can sell it. If you don't believe in it, who else will? There are plenty of competitions to be supported. There is sustainable value to maximize. Do you know what? It might just be the smartest play yet. So let's delve deeper into this conversation with more talented talkers here on stage. Let me welcome the Managing Director at Sports Sense, Cabello Bossilong. Also joining via video link, Sports Southern Europe Lead Media Partnerships at Meta, Kike Leve, and CEO at NBA Africa, Victor Williams. And to chair this conversation, the CMO at World Football Summit, Jaime Dominguez. Please welcome them on stage. Gents, thank you very much indeed. Jaime, as you know, this is a key topic for us. It's one that is a repeat offender. We have every single edition of WFS, whether we are in Africa or elsewhere. Delighted for you to have the conversation for us. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Well, gentlemen, Cabello, Victor, Kike, I think he's joining us virtually. So welcome, everybody, to this session. We'll be talking about sponsorship and the opportunities it has for the African football industry, okay? So I'm just going to get right to it. And I want to start off with a question, Cabello. Why is it now the time for brands to invest in the African football industry? What are, let's say, 2, 3 reasons to believe?
I think good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on stage. I think brands need to believe in football for reasons that have always been there. The passion for the game on the continent is next to none. I think we on the continent have some of the most passionate fans in world football, and it's a very untapped fan base that we have. So the passion is definitely there, and as discussed yesterday, most of the population are youth. Most of the population are young people, so we can get excited about that we're talking to a young generation. So we almost can understand what their needs are, what they want. And I think one of the most important things is it's affordable. The rights are not, rights fees are not exorbitant like in other well-placed markets. So it's affordable for brands to get involved within the industry and grow the industry and create value in that way.
Okay, fantastic. So, Victor, I want to ask you, what is the NBA's strategy to grow the sport here in Africa? Because you've been doing a lot of effort, and it's been growing massively. So I don't know if you can share some details on what you've been doing.
Absolutely, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here. What's a basketball guy doing at a football summit? I think, first of all, from a personal perspective, I'm a football fan as well. But more broadly speaking, I think that all of our sporting codes are really trying to advance our games as vehicles through which sponsors can engage with target audiences. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other in doing that. And there's a lot of room for collaboration in ensuring that we work together to grow the market, to grow the behavior of sponsorship and partnership, to grow the number of ways in which we access fans and get them engaged with what we're doing. And so I'm here to learn and pick up ideas and to share them as well. As far as the NBA in Africa is concerned, we are very much believers in the potential of Africa to be a huge market from a participation perspective, from a fan perspective, from a development of talent perspective, and from a commercial perspective in basketball as it is in football. And so our goal over the next 10 years is to build basketball and the NBA brand of basketball into one of the top sports lifestyle brands on the continent. And in some ways, I'd love every football fan to become a basketball fan as well. The key things we're going to focus on are participation, and that goes all the way from grassroots to elite. And so at the grassroots level, we'd love to replicate existing programs like we have, like the one with the Royal Bafokeng Nation, our junior NBA program, where we serve thousands of kids across more than 40 schools. We'd love to replicate that across the continent. We'd love to expand our academy footprint across the continent. And at the elite level, we've started a professional league, the Basketball Africa League, which is the first time the NBA has ever done a professional league outside North America. And with the BAL, we want to create the premier basketball competition on the continent and create a vehicle for African players to fulfill their potential on the continent without having to go anywhere else.
Okay.
From a fan perspective, we want to grow both our brands, the core NBA brand as well as the BAL brand, and make our games easily accessible to people through live events, through digital media, through merchandising. We opened our first NBA store on the continent in Santon City about a month ago, and it's done tremendously well. The response has been terrific. It's exceeded our expectations. And we look forward to rolling out the store footprint across the continent. And we want to show that basketball is a terrific vehicle for commercial partners to access their target audiences, to excite them, and to work with us to deliver positive fan experiences, but also economic and social impact to them.
Mm-hmm. To your point, I think it does a lot that when sport properties like the NBA, for example, La Liga is another example, know that they have physical presence.
Yep.
I think it does so much than trying to manage any sort of commercial operation from the distance. I think when you're, let's say, in the field, the reality changes so much, no? So it makes total sense. I want to shift a little bit into the conversation. You were mentioning sponsors, and I guess right now with all new technologies and new opportunities that are emerging, you see some new trends. So, Cabello, I'm going to ask you a question that, apologies in advance because it might seem a bit broad, but you have experience and you have visibility across the entire, let's say, African continent. I understand that Africa is just so different in many different areas. But do you see any patterns in terms of trends, sponsorship trends that we should be aware of?
Like you say, the continent is very vast, so you can't have a one kind of approach for a blanket approach for the whole continent. And I think that's been the difficulty, especially with within football. Let's say from a CAF level, when you try to come up with solutions, one solution does not fix every single market. So you've got to look at the different markets, look at the different players. We've got a lot of, languages, cultures, different types of ethnicity. So Africa is very vast, but in that, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think one of the key things is, broadcast content. We can't keep looking at the traditional broadcasters because, you're free to air. In most countries, they don't have the funds to pay for sporting rights. So we've got to come up with solutions, and football associations and clubs need to come up with. The platforms are there. It's just now, how do we get a vision together to say we need people to start seeing our content, because that's when brands will start aligning with your product. So if we don't look at those alternatives, and we discussed it yesterday in terms of all the different types of content that we could come up with, and I think we need to really start looking into that and investing into that as football administrators to ensure that we reach as many people as we can, because it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game, and sponsors will come on board if you show them the numbers. So we really need to look at that. And then another thing is we need to start creating value, because if we don't create value, then it's very difficult for sponsors to kind of really believe in what you're trying to do. And rights should not be bought. Rights should be created. Because that's when you get the real value of things are co-created together with a potential partner. If you just buy rights, it's a transaction, and that's what's currently happening and it's almost donation, charitable. That's how sponsorship is in most markets. It's charitable. Okay, we'll give you this because you need it. And the problem is, you as a rights holder have to show your value. You have to do measurements. You have to create the value so that the sponsor can now justify why we need to put more money into this particular property. So I think from a broadcast perspective and creating value, I think those two can kickstart have a ripple effect on a lot of other things within the sponsorship game.
Totally agree. I mean, sports in general, and football and basketball as well. No? I mean, the content is there. You're always going to get the highlights, but at the end of the day, you need distribution. You need to reach those fans. If not, it's really get lost, no? And I guess that ties well, Kike, with a question that I wanted to ask you. Basically, you work with a lot of sport properties. I want to understand, based on your experience with them, is there any, let's say, frameworks that sports properties are using to reach more fans, to better improve the digital sponsorship activations, or maybe an example you can share?
One analogy that Cabello just mentioned, and it's the ripple effect. And if you think about your social strategy, the ripple effect is very important. And the ripple in digital is content. Everything starts with content. And when you start creating content, you start getting people to engage with that content and building that community. And that's the key to success. The way I like to structure the work with different sports organizations is basically around three main areas. And everything starts with the first area, is the audience development. You start posting your content, reaching fans, and building that audience. Once you have built your audience and you have that community and you have created the community, you can jump into different monetization strategies. Those monetization strategies can be from direct monetization that you can get from digital platform, and I think the NBA is one of the best examples that we can mention here. They do a tremendous work in making TV broadcast and digital coexist and share a lot of content on digital while they maintain high value of the TV rights. So I think they are like one of the best examples that we can take across the industry, and a lot of things football clubs and the football industry should learn from how the NBA activates their content strategy. And once you are monetizing, you build your audience, you're monetizing, you can start thinking about more innovative ways to reach your fans and start thinking about the future of new technologies. There's one thing that it's very important and you need to consider. With traditional sponsorship, the value of the digital side is not normally really taken into account. The first thing that football teams and the football industry in Africa need to look at is how they're going to value these new digital assets. Because if you think about a traditional sponsorship model, there's limited space or limited number of sponsors you can put on your shirt. You cannot have more 3, 4, 5 sponsors on your shirt. But if you look at digital, you have infinite inventory of assets that you can sell, because your only limitation is the number of posts or the number of content pieces that you can create. So that's opened up a very interesting opportunity for fans. And I think one thing that also Cabello said, it's that it's very hard to find a one size fits all approach for the whole continent of Africa. So digital will allow you to basically create different strategies targeting different markets, and I think that's super interesting.
I really like that framework that you mentioned with, audience, monetize, and then go for the third pillar in innovation. Because sometimes it seems when we speak about new technologies, everybody just goes all the way to the technology without really looking into the fundamentals. No? At the end of the day, when we speak about sponsorship, yeah, the tech piece is nice. It's like a nice, icing on the cake. But at the end of the day, they want to reach audiences, what we were mentioning before with Cabello. No? In that sense, Victor, I don't know if you can help us understand how have you been able to expand the operations in Africa as not a blossoming sport, but a blossoming operation in Africa, and attract commercial partners?
So, this is part of our journey right now. One of the things we've committed to doing as part of growing our brand in this next period of our growth is getting much closer to our fans, to our potential partners in the key geographies around Africa. And, so we're going to go from one office in Johannesburg, which for a long time we used to serve the entire continent. And we've now opened an office in Senegal. We opened an office in Lagos, Nigeria, earlier this year, and we're planning to open a few more around the continent. And that will allow us to get much closer to fans and sponsors and to, as Cabello said, work closer with our partners to create and co-create powerful activations in those markets that fit those markets. We very much believe in localization. Africa is huge, and what works in Cairo doesn't work in Cape Town. And so getting really dialed into the local dynamics is important. And so, I think a key element of getting closer to the local countries is also enabling us to measure impact and demonstrate value to partners. Data collection around Africa in terms of, yes, you did some activation. For example, we in Lagos in February worked with one of our partners to create a floating basketball court in the middle of the Lagos Lagoon. I hope some of you saw that on social media. But then how do you measure the impact of that and the reach of that and the social media engagement and the value that delivered to our partner so that you can then sell that or similar concepts to other partners. Okay. And so one of the things we're needing to do is actually look to invest in data gathering above and beyond what the industry on the continent is delivering right now.
Okay. So at the end of the day, I fully agree with that approach. And it ties back to what we were, mentioning before. You need to be there. You need to be in the field. And the more you get into the field and going into different markets, it's going to make a big difference, both for the fans, because they're going to feel there's going to be more relevance in those activations, which at the end of the day is key, but also for the partners, because they're going to feed off that relevance to maybe get ideas for future programs.
Absolutely.
No, so
And
go ahead, Kike, please.
sorry to-
Please.
I mean, one thing that Victor said, and it's really interesting, it's data. And sometimes when I sit down with partners, with football clubs, they don't look at data the right way. If you think about social media engagement is telling you what the fan likes and what the fan doesn't like. So sometimes it's like when I'm sitting with a partner, they say, oh, this video was great, we get 1 million views. But basically what that data is telling you is that video was seen by many people and people like the content, so you should be doing more of that in order to engage with your audience properly. And if you have other videos that are creating less views or less engagement, that is telling you, okay, we should maybe stop doing more of this and try to do more of what's generating more engagement and more interaction. So data is key, and it's I think the biggest gap that we have in the sport industry, well, not in the sport industry, but the football industry in particular, and that's something that applies to all big football clubs. Sometimes they even forget about how important it is to look at data and report return investment to sponsorship.
That's a great point, Kike. I think. I don't know if anybody wants to feed off that, but my thought with what you said now is, I think that the model has shifted, because traditionally what happened is the sponsor just wanted exposure and just, I want to send my message out there. Now, with all the technology and all the data, as you said, Kike, is what are we doing to use the data? And actually, are we listening to that data? Are we looking at that data? Are we making decisions out of that data? And then how can we use it to really implement more effective solutions? No? So at the end of the day, that's a fantastic point. I guess in that sense, that ties well with my next question. So again, going back to Cabello, I don't know, again, with all the work you've done over the years, do you see a property or a club or even a brand that's an example in terms of carrying out a successful sponsorship strategy?
Yeah, there's definitely clubs or organizations that do have good sponsorship strategies, but I think we need to go back to basics. And especially from a rights holder, you know, I think the onus is on the rights holders to up their game, because the sponsors are there, the sponsors will be there, but it's up to the rights holders now to make sure that they service the sponsors in a better way. A simple example is most clubs, you know, when I do club licensing workshops across the continent, I talk to the clubs. Most clubs don't even have a database of their fans, of their support. They don't even know their supporters. So if you ask them, who are your supporters? How many of them are men? How many of them are women? How many are children? What do they like to, they don't have that information. And it's very difficult to start a sponsorship discussion if you don't know who you are. So I think we need to start by understanding ourselves as the rights holders in terms of what are we trying to sell? Who are the people that we are taking with to this brand? And it will now help you eliminate some of the brands that you might not necessarily talk to because those are not your demographics. So we need to understand who are our customers as the rights holders so that we can have more insights in terms of who do we then select to co-create value in the ecosystem. So rights holders have a very big responsibility in doing that, and also servicing your sponsors, because a lot of the times the deal gets done, money exchanged, and then you're done. You don't service the client. And a lot of sponsors then, you know, you're not getting your tickets on time, your fixtures are changing left, right, and center, so we can't leverage the sponsorship in the correct manner. So those are the kind of things that rights holders need to understand, that they have a big impact on sponsors and in how they can leverage that sponsorship and creating more success in that sponsorship. So rights holders, my plea is mainly for the rights holders, because once we can take care of that, it'll be a lot easier conversation talking to brands and sponsors to start having those successful partnerships. But back to your question, in terms of successful partnerships, there's many, especially in the South African market, there's many partnerships, whether it's from a club level, Chiefs and Pirates have been sponsored by Vodacom, which is a telecommunications company, for many years now. And, it was a bit taboo at the beginning. How can the two biggest rivals in the country have the same sponsor? But it's obviously been a successful partnership because you're talking to the same person. Yes, it's different teams, and you can play on that rivalry as well. So that's been a successful partnership. From a property point of view, your MTN8 and your Carling Black Label Cup are very good, innovative sponsorship properties that, are first of its kind in the world. You look at the Carling Black Label Cup in terms of the return on investment that they get from a tournament that's literally a one-day tournament, but the numbers that they get from that in terms of engagement, because you can select the team that you want to be playing, but to select the team, you have to buy the product. So everything is integrated within that property, and that's what we need to start looking at. We can do it from a smaller scale. We can't always be looking at your blue chip companies to come in and throw money at you. You look at your small, I even advise clubs, I'm like, your shirt is real estate. Even if someone doesn't give you money, go to a brand that you would like to partner with and say, we'll put you on for free for a season. And you measure that and track that. And then after a season, you can go to them and say, this is the value that we gave you as a club for that season. You didn't give us anything, but your brand was there. It makes the conversation a lot easier the next season when you now want to start, let's talk about, numbers. Let's talk about what you can invest into this club. But we've got to be taking radical decisions, things like that, so that we can open it up, because we're not going to get people to just come and sponsor and donate if you're not going to show, and if you're also not going to be willing to go out there and give away some of your real estate for free and say, let's try this. So we've got to come up with innovative ways in which we can attract sponsors to our game so that they can stay for the long run.
Definitely, and I go back to a point that you mentioned before, and I think it ties well with something that Kike said before, that really it's about the fundamentals. And I hope the audience understands this, both here and those watching online. I think really the basics is key. Dominating the basics is it's going to take you to the next level, no? And then another point is trust. At the end of the day, a partnership, a sponsorship program is about trust, and it's really feeding off each other, proving that we can all drive value. And it's not just that one-off transaction, because obviously the long-term success of a partnership is going to be based on trust and vision, let's say. I get a sense in a way that it seems we're talking about properties and clubs, but we are also living, thanks to this emergence of digital platforms, in an era where they call it the player empowerment era, where now the players are getting more relevance than probably ever before. So I think when you look at it, there's examples of players even driving greater engagement than sport properties out there, no? So Kike, I want to understand, because a lot of these players are actually leveraging their personal brands on digital platforms such as, Facebook, Instagram. They are huge distribution channels for their content. So how does this change the traditional commercial model that sports properties have? And again, do you have an example of brands that are working on, let's call it that triangle of brands, clubs, and players to get the most, or a win-win situation for all of them?
One thing that I challenge the audience and see if someone can name one, it's every football club in the world has at least one player that has more followers than the club itself. And this is an interesting reality, because in general, social media tend to follow more people than brands, because they feel more connected. Having said that offers a great opportunity to the sponsorship deals, because if you're a football club, you can activate your sponsorship deals through your players, and that's something. Your players are best ambassadors to make to activate your sponsorship deals, basically. There are a lot of brands that are doing this the right way, and if you look, for example, at the big clubs like Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, Things that FC Barcelona is doing with Spotify, I found them really interesting on how players are playing a role in that. I can remember FC Barcelona campaign with one of the sponsors, Cupra, last year around the Clásico, where they were creating content with the players, and the players were at the center of the strategy of the campaign. So those are really good examples on how you can use your players, and I think at the end of the day, it's all about how you activate better your sponsorship and use all the assets that you have at your disposal. PSG is also doing great things with the sponsor and creating content that is really engaging and using their athletes as ambassador to land their sponsor messages.
Yeah, definitely. And I encourage everyone here to check out those examples that Kike was mentioning, because they are truly, good examples to learn from. And also, there's a good example of an organization that works with players is the NBA. All over the world, not here just in Africa, but all over the world. But specifically, I want to understand, Victor, how does the NBA, or how important is it for you to collaborate with those players as a big part to grow the game here in Africa?
It's huge. I think one of the things that we're blessed with at the NBA is a collaborative relationship with our players. And so we have an understanding that together, by working together, we can create more value for everyone, including, obviously, the players. Many of our players are global icons. And as Kike said, they're huge brands in themselves. I haven't measured whether LeBron has more followers than the Lakers, but
it might be
I'll go take a look. But as far as Africa is concerned, one of the things that we really want to do is work with the current crop of African players and African stars so that they can become more better known across the continent and get closer to our fans here. And so historically, almost everyone who's an African basketball fan knows of Akeem Olajuwon,
yes,
or Dikembe Mutombo. But, we want people to know of Joel Embiid and Pascal Siakam and Bam Adebayo and the other exciting African stars that we have today in the same way. And the players themselves are eager to engage. Mm-hmm. The length of our season means that there's only largely a window in the, call it between June and October, when they can come to the market and be here. Many of them run camps today, but we're continuously looking for ways to bring them to the continent and engage with fans. One of the powers of digital media is that even when they don't come to the continent, we can share their stories. And so if you go to our NBA app, shameless plug, we actually, I was looking at yesterday, we have a section called Best of Africa. Mm-hmm. And so if you're an African NBA fan, you should be able, going forward, to track the progress of some of our African stars, and we'll be looking to tell more of their off-court stories to the African audiences as well.
And I guess one of the key ideas that I got from what you just said is the active participation that both legends of the game and active players of the game are having in helping grow the industry here. And if you look at football, they probably don't have anything to envy in terms of the legends. There's a lot of football legends here. And there's also current players that are superstars, and they're effectively being, they're stars of the game in top clubs. So how can we as a football industry help grow the game using their influence in the global game itself? No, I think that's kind of like the key question.
I think just to add on to that, I think one of the things that we can do, which is what happens a lot, and this may sound bad, but I think in African football, the stars of the game are the administrators. That has to change. The stars should be the football players.
Yeah.
You ask people about a certain club, the first name come are administrators more than the footballers. So we've got to change that mindset that the footballers are the stars of the show. And once we let them be the stars of the show, brands can then start attracting themselves to the players themselves. More money can start flowing within the ecosystem. So we as administrators need to put them in the front and not ourselves, because at the end of the day, most people don't know who the administrators of these big clubs are, but you know who the players are. But with us, it's the reverse, where we have the administrators who are the stars. And I'm not saying that they're not, doing their job, but the players should be the ones who are taking all the headlines, because they are the ones who are going to bring you all the revenue that you do need. And they're the ones who are going to assist, like Kike said, becoming your brand ambassadors. So we need to push the players in the spotlight a lot more and create that value for the players so that they can become superstars, because I don't feel like we have superstar African players in terms of mega superstars on the continent. Big African players that are playing in Europe, but on the continent, do we have any players who are superstars and are treated as such? It's, you have to go to Europe to get that superstar kind of feeling, but we can create it on the continent, and nothing's stopping us to, but I think we need to push the players in the front, and we take a step back so that they can then generate more revenue for us.
Definitely. And not only that, I mean, a lot of those players are actually willing to give back because they know the journey. They've been through the journey. They know it's difficult. So they, again, a lot of them are grateful to, hey, how can I open up more opportunities like the ones I enjoy? No? So anyway, gentlemen, we have a few minutes left, and I just want to ask all of you a common question. So I'm going to start with you, Cabello, but please, Kike, Victor, please, I would like to know your opinion. I think the audience is going to benefit a lot from it. Based on what we discussed today, is there any piece of advice that you would give any sponsor, any brand looking for opportunities in the region?
I would say they must open their minds. And like I said before, go in with an open mind, but look to co-create things within different markets. As you can see with the type of companies that are sponsoring, it's your telcos, it's your, in Africa, a lot of places you cannot use beer, alcoholic brands, you cannot use betting companies. So in a lot of places there is limitations, but there's also opportunities there as well. So we need to open our minds in terms of brands getting into the football space. But my plea is more towards the administrators to make sure that they also come up to the party and show what is available. It's like inviting someone to your house, and you need to show them what is it that you have, what you can offer them. And we need to make sure that we're not just, trying to get money from sponsors, but then not servicing them. I mean, when I do some workshops with clubs, a lot of the clubs, every time, what's your biggest complaint? What's their biggest complaint is, we don't have money. We don't have money. It's like, okay. Then I say, if I was to give you $100 million right now, what would you do with that money? Majority of them spend it on players because they don't budget. They don't say, no, I need to spend 20% on marketing, 30% on administration. All the money goes to players, buying players, which is important. A big chunk should go, but you also must think of all the other elements within your organization that also need, revenue or resources so that you can build and develop and grow. So I think proper planning, strategy, have a clear strategy so that brands can buy into your strategy as well, so that you can find alliances and people that are going in the same direction that you want to go into.
So going back to the fundamentals. Kike, I don't know if you want to weigh in with a final opinion?
Yes, I think Cabello just pointed out really well, have a strategy. That's the most important thing. Have a long-term vision. Don't think only on short-term revenue. And I'm gonna talk directly to football clubs in Africa. Think about your content strategies. Think about what content you want to create, what story you want to tell, start building your audience. And once you have built your audience with content, with quality content, you can start thinking about strategies to monetize and think about how you can integrate your sponsors into your content and use the story you're telling to integrate sponsors. I think that's the most important piece of advice I could give any club. Don't think on social media as the end game. Think as social media platform to get to your business. That's also a very important thing to have in mind.
Thank you, Kike. And Victor, finally, if we can get a quick opinion on your side based on your experience with the NBA.
So first to sponsors is to say sports is worth it. There's a unique passion that fans have with sport. And if you can work with rights holders to get some of that passion to transfer to your brand so that they become fans of your brand in the same way that they are fans of their particular club or player, you're going to be ahead of the competition. Second point is around aligning with partners who have the same vision and values, because that ultimately becomes the basis of a sustainable long-term relationship. The sense that we are both trying to move our customers and our fans in the same way, and we want to do it in a way that calls on the same values. And then the third is to realize that in today's world, that journey requires data. And so it's the willingness to collaborate between the sponsor and the rights holder to create, analyze, and use data to help make better decisions that drive investments and activations.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a privilege for me to moderate this session. I personally learned a lot. I hope the audience did as well. Kike, thank you for joining virtually. Cabello, Victor, it's been great being with you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great stuff, gents. Thank you very much indeed. Off you go. Kike, thank you for joining us virtually as well. We will have you in person next time for sure. You will not want to miss the opportunity to come to Africa. I think there was lots of good takeaways right there at the very end. I hope you were taking notes. Great insights there. Victor talking about transferring passion. I mean, this is ultimately what we're in it for, especially here in Africa. You know, if you can transfer the passion to the brand, the passion you've got in your sporting entity, aligning with people the same values and vision, that's important. It's not just a transactional thing, sponsorship. It's more partnership. It's the true notion of partnership. And the journey requires data. Yeah, look into that data. It's not just about having it. It's about looking at it, analyzing it, making sense of it. It's not just data. It's information, then knowledge. And then you're getting somewhere. Kike, you know, and you would expect this from Kike, from where he comes from Meta and Facebook, etc. Starts with the content. You've got to get fans to engage with the content and then building the community around that. And African football, African sports have to value those assets more, because then you have like an infinite inventory of assets that you can sell when you look at the digital side. You can't create a digital sort of one-size-fits-all. You can tailor for your audience. And Cabello with a very simple, and I think almost like baseline idea of knowing yourselves and knowing your audience, because that's who you take to the brand. You've got to understand your audience through the data, really look at it, analyze it, granular detail. Then you know who it is that you're bringing to the brand, and then you know whether the brand fits or not. It might not fit. It's a value exchange. And then, you know, if you know about your impact, your audience, it will have impact on the sponsors and then therefore the partnerships. And Jaime as well. Getting the basics right, it's all about trust. By the way, if you were wondering, because Victor mentioned about LeBron James, does he have more followers than the LA Lakers? What do you think? Probably? Yeah. Let me tell you, just on Instagram, LA Lakers, 20.6 million followers. LeBron James, 137 million followers. That's just Instagram. You can kind of work out the rest as well. Fascinating session. Thank you very much to the guys for that.